Hey y'all, thank you all so much for tuning into this next episode of Talk to Not At. I'm your host, Abby, and the show is produced by the amazing Debate Boutique Network. Now, we're kind of switching gears from how the past 3 episodes have gone, right? We just concluded a 3-part series to a conversation on colorism, texturism. We talked about accountability, and the highlight is that we had a co-host on for a couple of the episodes. Jasmine Pickens, right, my producer, came on and really helped us dissect the topic, gave us some amazing insight. So I'm gonna just really, again, plug that series because, y'all, it was masterful, right? It was a conversation that needed to be had. We needed to talk about accountability. So I would really suggest, if you haven't checked it out yet, feel free to go do so. But in terms of this week, right, we're doing a little bit change of pace, and we're going to talk about some very current political cases that are going on right now, right? So I'm sure some of y'all are already like, oh, I know where we're going with this. But before we get into it, so often, right, I mention this background I have in debate. I mean, I'm on the Debate Boutique Network, right? I'm a part of them. So sometimes it's like, okay, how does debate, right, really shape these conversations that we have? What's the connection? Put the pieces together. So one of the most influential ways that debate kind of relates to today is that last year, when I was coaching high school, the high school topic was actually criminal justice reform, right? So the idea was that students around the nation are making a plan that's going to address the failing of the criminal justice system. Either it can be policing, sentencing, forensic science, but they needed to pick an aspect and talk about it. So a lot of students are talking about we should abolish the police. A lot of students are talking about ways that sentencing is racially biased. There was a lot of different, really amazing conversations happening. But one of the things that really became apparent to me during all these debates, right, when I'm judging them, was that the criminal justice system it's not an easy fix, right? Abolishing the police doesn't solve the issue. Abolishing the prison system doesn't solve the issue, because the real issue is, the truth of it is that the system is not failing. The criminal justice system is not failing, but rather it's working perfectly. It was made to continue to allow a legalized form of slavery within the prison apparatus. It was made to allow legal lynching of Black people by police officers. It was made to instill this biopolitical type of fear, right? To continue to uphold this world order, the way that the world operates, right? It was made to keep Black people in their place. I mean, literally, when we think of how policing even started, the idea or the concept evolved from slave catchers. In fact, slave catchers stations actually transitioned into some of the exact police headquarters or jail cells, right? Slave catchers themselves actually then became police officers. Because again, the idea was that once the Civil War ended and slaves could no longer, people couldn't legally be slaves, there still needed to be a way to keep a type of order, right? To keep a hierarchy system. So they didn't get rid of slave catchers, they just evolved them into something that worked for the modern context, the modern demand. So reform isn't the question, because again, the system is working how it's supposed to be working. And when we have cases happening, right, sometimes I think we sell short of what the expectations are, right? We set these standards of oh, if there's justice, then at least, that's a step in the right direction. But no, anti-blackness is insidious. It's a calculated form of violence. I swear that's my favorite phrase, because I be saying that all the time, but it is a calculated form of violence that works in different ways to not only keep whiteness unnamed, uncloaked, unmarked, right, hidden. Not only to keep whiteness hidden, but also to always adapt and evolve to a situation, so it's hard to pinpoint what the exact issue is. So I don't know if I'm a conspiracy theorist, y'all. I mean, I'm sure I could do more digging and figure it out, but I in general find it very odd that in 1 week three like super high profile political cases that deal with the Black community happen at the same time. I mean, we had Julius Jones, we had the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and then we still have going on the Ahmaud Arbery case as well. And I'm like, okay, that's wild to me that all three of these are happening, especially like for Julius Jones, his sentencing was in 1999, right? Like, why is it this week, this time? I mean, these decisions are things that people make, right? I'm sorry, but I feel as though certain things are orchestrated because as a community, y'all, we do not have the energy, we do not have the capacity to divide ourselves and provide each case the correct amount of attention that it deserves. So things fall through the cracks. I mean, Julius Jones' life almost fell through the cracks because I wasn't even hearing about it on social media until like 2 days before his execution was scheduled by some tweet from J. Cole and Kim Kardashian. That's ridiculous. Right, that is absolutely ridiculous that a man's life almost fell through the cracks, even though there were prior like decisions or votings from different judges and like the parole, the probation or parole, right, group saying that they felt like he should be, his charges like should be dropped or acquitted. I'm sorry, I'm like totally stumbling over the exact term. But the fact that there was a 3-1 vote where they were like, yeah, no, Julius Jones should not be executed. Like, when did this happen? And why wasn't I informed? Why did I not notice or see that? Because at the same time, there's also this Kyle Rittenhouse case going. And at the end of the day, when I was sitting here preparing for this episode, I was like, who even are the victims? Kyle's face is plastered all over social media. This white boy crying is the talk of the entire week, right? Is what everybody's talking about. But I'm like, but what about the families? What about the victim who survived? I haven't even seen his face one time. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, there's pieces that are missing because we, again, don't have the energy to address everything, to be able to absorb everything. And then we get to Ahmaud Arbery's case too. And I'm like, okay, so where are the snippets from his case? Because this is also live streamed. Why am I not seeing snippets of his case all over social media at the same rate? I think the first time I did was maybe today. I finally saw something when one of the murderers was just like, no, was like answering the yes or no questions and was like, no, 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 and made it very apparent that, yeah, he, like, Ahmaud Arbery was not a threat to anybody. But I've seen very little coverage compared to the coverage that we've seen of Kyle. And things are slipping through the cracks in this case. When I'm researching and looking into what's going on, I'm like, how the heck did we not see this? Why have I not heard about this? Why is nobody talking about this? Because the thing is that we recognize police brutality. We recognize courts are biased. But when we are so, focused on these larger pictures, which we need to be, and it's not saying that it's our fault, right? It's just recognizing how calculated, how intricate anti-blackness operates. When there's these larger questions that we're attempting to address, there's all of these other mundane forms of violence that continue to happen that are falling through the cracks, that are no longer getting the attention or not even being recognized. They become the new standard, the new norm, the new culture. So it limits the type of reform or progression or change to the system that can happen because it allows for all of these other forms of violence to just re-navigate themselves, reorient themselves in a way that's now seems to be more digestible, right? Like, oh, there was the man who murdered George Floyd, like, is found guilty. So then we are like, yes, there has been some form of justice, right? But all the other pieces begin to slip through the cracks, right? That it wasn't just one officer, there were all these officers there. So yes, they all should have faced some type of repercussion. And the process of how the case was handled, right? Some of the language that was used, that those things become normalized or acceptable because the larger picture, the overall issue, right, is addressed by the court. Yet the bias is still there. The anti-blackness is still there. It's just hidden. It's more mystified. So I really want to talk about these cases because I know that you know, a lot of us have heard the facts of the cases. A lot of us know the situations that happen surrounding the cases. So I'm not necessarily trying to talk too much as to just the narrative or the stories of the case, but rather I want to talk about some of the unique ways that anti-blackness is showing itself when we look at these different cases, especially when we're looking at the Kyle and the Arbery case that Kyle just wrapped up, but the Ahmaud Arbery case is still happening right now. So, you know, I'm kind of just putting us in that political mindset. But before we jump into this conversation about like the calculated ways of anti-blackness and really dive into these cases, I want to make sure we all take a second, right? I really want to make sure that we take a moment to recognize like the victims of these cases, to make sure that we acknowledge them, that we, you know, pay some respect to them, because at the end of the day, people lost their lives. And this is not a light topic. It's very draining. And also, I gotta be honest, if you know, have any black friends, like if you yourself aren't black, if you are black, just check in with your friends and family, okay? Like check in with people, just be like, hey, how are you doing? I know right now this is a lot, because mind you, it's not just that something that we see on the news, we see on social media. We have to go to work, okay? We have to live our lives. And these conversations are happening all around us, and it's draining, and it's hard. And it makes it so you feel like almost like you're suffocating, because it could be not just that, it could be anyone, right? It could be, you know, your loved one the next day, but also that there's like a kinship. There's a communal connection where it's like, dang, we're going through the same form of violence, the same suffering together, and I'm seeing my community go through this. It's hard. So I just want to take a moment, you know, for those who are really having a hard time right now, take a moment for yourself to breathe, get into that mindset for the conversation. Also for us to take a moment to pay respect to those who lost their lives, who we're talking about today. And yeah, if you need to take a second, you know, text someone. It's actually a reminder for you, text them and say, hey, how are you doing? Hey, I just wanted to check in, because even that just goes a long way. So let's take a moment, y'all, and breathe. Y'all, I hope we, you know, had a second to breathe, to pay some respects, maybe to send that, you know, message to a loved one, to make sure that, you know, everyone's doing okay, do that mental health check real quick. But, you know, as we kind of left off before we took our breathe moment, we were talking about how the system is working perfectly and how we recognize these typical signs of anti-blackness when it comes to the criminal justice system, right? When I say those typical signs, I mean like the idea that the judge is biased, or the video of police brutality, or using a mugshot of a black victim. But what I'm kind of calling out is that these are not consistent patterns, right? These aren't things that happen every single time, or that there's this formalized checklist, if you will, that we can mark off different questions or symptoms to be like, is this trial anti-black? Yes or no? Does it have X, Y, and Z? If it only has 2 out of the 10 categories, then no, it's not. But no, that's not how it works, right? Because what this does is we, and not we as in it's our fault, but there becomes this idea set that if certain criteria are met, then it shows progression. If there's certain ways that things happen, then it shows improvement or reform. And what I'm kind of calling out here today is that no, it's not that simple. It's not that easy. It's that the system is made to adapt and bend to always make it so that way white supremacy is normal, is okay, is humane. And to do that, it adapts to the current culture, political environment. It creates this simulated reality as though there is some type of progress, right? This ruse of analogy, as though there is some incorporation of Black people into society. But in all actuality, the system's just remystifying itself. It's adapting itself, it's evolving itself, it's reorganizing itself to maintain that same structural hierarchical system, right, of white supremacy, and then Blackness as being non-human, as being something that is, you know, consistently going through genocide, consistently going through extinction level events. When I say extinction level events, I mean events that have the ability to like wipe out, harm, and hurt an entire population, right? To change the ways that an entire community is able to live. Like slavery was an extinction level event, right? Hurricane Katrina is like an extinction level type of event where an entire culture and identity is being targeted, right? Is being attacked. So when we're looking at these cases, right? I mean, first, Kyle was acquitted, so we already know, okay, there was bias in it. But when we were doing our Posmo, one of the things I want to point out is that in the Kyle case, one, Kyle is being centered like the entirety of the conversation. I mean, there is so much screen time provided to this white kid on all social media platforms, news platforms. Like when I was originally even doing my research, when I type in Kyle, I'm getting hourly updates. I'm getting updates. You know, there's updates of like live updates from news articles 3 hours ago. Yet when I go to look into Ahmaud's case, Arbery's case, right, I'm like, I'm only seeing stuff from 2-3 days ago. In fact, one of the first articles that was on my search feed was an article written 2 days ago, but it was so outdated information. The information was stuff that, you know, was discussed like back in, I want to say September, October, like very outdated information as though that was breaking news. It wasn't current at all. Yet, so there's not that same type of resources that are focused on Arbery's case as they were for the Rittenhouse case. So that's just an example of how the anti-blackness is still working, right? And also not in a way that this diminishes the value of the lives lost, but in the Kyle case, I'm not sure if I was the only one who was under the impression that any of the victims were at least people of color. Like, I think I misheard this because there was so little attention given to the actual victims. I thought like somebody was Black. But no, all the victims, which again, this does not diminish the value of their lives, but there was no attack on a Black person, right? They were all white allies who were responding to a situation where a police officer had shot a Black person and they became paralyzed. They were protesting an act of police brutality. But there was so little conversation of the victims, right? Because part of me thinks that it was easier for people to like be under the impression that if they were Black victims, maybe their lives didn't have as much value. Like maybe there was more likelihood that there might be justice if it was really talked about and humanized, like the fact of like the whiteness of these men who were targeted. And again, this is not to say that there's any devaluing of the people who were victims. It's not to say that there is any less like harm that was done, and the loss of life is a horrific thing, right? It doesn't change that something horrible was done. It doesn't change the severity of Kyle Rittenhouse's crimes, right? He murdered 2 people and severely harmed a 3rd individual. Like all around, this kid should have been found guilty. But there was so lack of conversations of the victims during the cases that it left a lot of information out that could have either helped the case or not helped the case. I know that at times the family members, like the fiance of one of the victims, took the stand and testified that the 3rd victim who faced who was extremely harmed, but he didn't pass away, he also took the stand and testified. There were all these moments that weren't on the media. But what was on the media was this white boy crying, right? I'm like, you're telling me that none of the other family members who took the stand didn't have emotional moments, that we didn't sit here and talk about the victim? that one of the issues is that this isn't just uncommon, that there's been more and more cases of people going to protests that are surrounding Black life and inciting riots and shooting. Like, this isn't the first time this has happened. All of these pieces of information are slipping again through the cracks. Yet at the same time, for Arbery, we're getting nothing. When we hear the Arbery case, right, we have a picture of Arbery that's not a mugshot. So does that mean anti-blackness isn't happening? Does that mean it's better? No, that's the system, right, making itself look a little better. So there's less investigation to the anti-blackness that's in the case. Because it just seems on a paper value that, okay, this might be going a little better than what typically would happen. So maybe we don't need to talk about it as much. But no, in the Arbery case, just like we give all this time to this white judge sitting here in the Rittenhouse case, you know, and showing when he be acting out, when he be wilding, we need that same energy for Arbery's case, because there were moments, y'all, there have been plenty of moments where it's like, damn, did you really just say that? Did you really think that that was something that you should say? And that we are out here enraged by it. For example, in the Arbery case, right, the defending attorney sat here and tried to plead to the judge that we needed to have a mistrial because there was too much political pressure coming from the 200 protesters outside the court case or the courthouse, and that it was pressuring the jury to make like biased decisions, right? This whole side tangent that isn't even about the case, right? He makes this whole like submission of a mistrial to get these 3 men acquitted, probably because he knows that based on the evidence, these 3 people, like, they're guilty, right? They murdered this man. They didn't just murder him, they lynched this man, publicly executed him. But yeah, as he's saying this, he decides to use the phrases, which I found really offensive based on the climate of what the court case is about. But he used the phrase that this is what a current day lynching mob looks like. I said, sir, do you not realize that you are defending 3 people who chased and shot a man, and who even during the trial said that this man was just running away from them? Are you not aware? Like, how dense are you? Because that was so trivializing. And lynching, did you really say lynching as though that's not something that historically happens to Black people, that carries a lot of racial weight on it? Are you qualified to be a lawyer, especially for this type of case? Because I'm not getting it. So that was when I'm like, okay, why is this not being talked about? On top of that, this man also gets up and says that because a high profile Black pastor, right, came to the case, that we shouldn't allow any more Black pastors to come to the case because it's intimidating to the jury. He actually said, y'all, I'm gonna quote this from him, we don't want any more Black pastors coming in here. Sir, no. How do you not realize, like, you are actively being anti-Black, you are actively being racist? Yet these conversations, where are they on our social media pages? Why am I not seeing those live clips, right? Where's the same resource allocation for Arbery that was given to the Rittenhouse case? People are so, the orchestrating of getting us so riled up and consumed with, oh, did y'all really see this kid have the audacity to sit there and cry as though he's a victim? Makes it so we don't got the same energy to allocate, okay, now let me go look up what's going on in Arbery's case right now, because I'm sure that there's wilding over here, there is definitely wilding over there. Again, what I keep saying, things are falling through the cracks, because that's how anti-Blackness works. And even more, I honestly do not think that if we didn't have people like Kim Kardashian, I'm not saying I like the Kardashians, y'all, okay? That's a whole other thing. But if there had not been those tweets by Kim Kardashian and J. Cole, I really do not think Julius Jones would have ever gotten the attention that was needed to put pressure on the governor to actually accept that, like, the recommendation that he should not be executed. I believe that we would be like, wow, did you all hear about how this black man was executed yesterday who shouldn't have been? Because there wasn't any political energy that we as a community could really allocate into continuing to do checkup and resources, because we're spread so thin on these other cases, right? In fact, we see in Oklahoma, tons of high school students had walked out of school the day of. But that same energy, I mean, it's not seen as intense across the nation as it probably would have been if we had the emotional capacity to really, give it the energy that Julius Jones deserves. Ahmaud Arbery we would be talking so much more about his case if we had the political energy to give to the case what he deserves, right? The victims of what in the Kyle Rittenhouse case would have more recognition, more humanization than what we're giving them. Because we're sitting here like, okay, so there was justice for Julius Jones, we got one. Kyle, nope, didn't happen, so that's a downfall. Now we're supposed to turn and be like, okay, now let's tune into Arbery. Like, we're tired. And that's the way that anti-blackness works, is that key pieces of information are left out of these cases. Key moments are left out of these cases, not publicized as much, right? There's tolerance for this lawyer to say anti-black, hateful comments during Arbery's case. There's a tolerance for that, and it becomes a new norm that you can sit here and say you felt comfortable enough to say you don't want no more black pastors in here. Really felt comfortable enough to say because it's the norm, it's tolerable, it's digestible. It's ways that anti-blackness has reorganized itself to continue to establish this hierarchical system that devalues black life and black existence, but values whiteness, right? Values white boy tears, but doesn't value what happened in Arbery's case when it came to actively saying you don't want black people coming up into the court. Right, and it's not even just there. That's not even all of the, I guess, like, issues that we're currently having with these cases. This is kind of just a very superficial conversation to get us to start thinking about, okay, what are some of the deeper ways that anti-blackness can still operate? I mean, Kyle sat here. I don't even think we realized that Kyle got dismissed, and I say don't realize, I mean I didn't realize until I began to research, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but Kyle had a weapon charge dismissed by the judge, completely dismissed, when he was carrying an AR-15, because the judge was allowing for this AR-15 that went across state lines, that was illegally acquired, right? Not something that was required, again, through the proper procedure for the state that he purchased it from. But said it was because of a law that said, okay, kids are allowed to have, at a certain age, can have long barrel guns, with the point of it being used for hunting. So he stretched a law, he bended the law, when we sit here and black kids are children playing with the toy gun in a park and they get killed. They get killed for playing with a toy gun. Yet this white kid was able to cross state lines, actively incite violence, and then murder 2 allies and severely wound another ally, and just gets the charge just dismissed just like that. That's part of the ways that anti-blackness is happening, is operating in these cases, right? It's still establishing this devaluing of black life, but the idea that the laws will bend and be flexible, and the humanity, the humanist, there is room for sympathy when it comes to the white, this white kid Kyle, right? There's room for sympathy, but there's no sympathy that's happening when we're thinking of the Arbery case, because we're not hearing about some of the OC things that this lawyer is saying. It's not receiving the same resources, the same intention, right? Same for Julius Jones. There was no humanity until there was some pressure that the trauma that this governor instilled. It's deeper than that, right? The trauma, the PTSD this governor instilled by purposely making it a public media thing where he last minute decides to accept the motion, literally a couple hours before decides to accept this motion. He's already been fed his final meal. He's already been prepped, right? He's already on 24-hour watch. And it was chosen to just wait, to allow him as long as he could to sit with that fear, to allow Julius Jones for as long as that governor could hold out, sit in the fear that he was going to be murdered. We have this family out here pleading. That trauma, what that does to somebody, that's not changing. That's something that's permanent, right? That's forever changing the lives of these individuals, as though the 20 years that this man served for a crime he didn't commit wasn't already enough. It's insidious, right? There is some type of pleasure that this governor gained by knowing that the life of Julius Jones was in his hands, and that he could sit here and make people suffer and suffer simply because he had the power to do so. So I'm just hoping, right, like as we kind of talk about some of these different type of categories, I guess what I'm coming to is like this conclusion that when it comes to the criminal justice system, blackness cannot be recognized, right? Blackness cannot be addressed. Blackness cannot be acknowledged. And blackness also cannot be a victim, right? Blackness is always the criminal. Blackness is something that always must be targeted, that always must be eradicated, and the system will always work in new ways to continue that same goal, right? To continue to do that same thing of devaluing, dehumanizing blackness, eradicating blackness, allowing for legal lynching, justifying harm onto blackness. In Arbery's case, right, the actual blackness is not recognized, right? As to why are black pastors here? Because there's an issue with police brutality. There's an issue with white men thinking they got the right to sit up here and hunt down black people. There's so many parallels between Arbery's case and Trayvon Martin's case. The issue of how blackness is being targeted isn't being recognized. So if we're going to sit here and be like, okay, there's a victim that we're talking about, we have to completely eradicate the conversation of blackness, so that way there can be some level of recognition into what the facts of the case are. We're not sitting here humanizing Arbery. We're not sitting here acknowledging Arbery in the in this case, right? We're not sitting here recognizing that anti-blackness is a thing. We're not sitting here saying these men were racist. We're sitting here just looking at the facts. And I say we, I mean that's how the case is being presented itself. Like, okay, let's just look at the facts. Like, just, that's it. Where's the humanity? Where's the humanization? Where's the valuing of Arbery, right? The recognition of like, hey, as a judge, there's a lot of anti-blackness happening in this courtroom, and I think we need to address it because it shapes why we're even here having this conversation today. The root reason why we're here is because there was a lynching done by 3 white men, and it was racist. It was a hate crime. But I guess, you know, at the end of the day, it's not just going to, I realize like these things aren't just going to change. They're not just going to blow over. But I really wanted us in terms of what's up next, to begin to think a little bit deeper about the system. Think a little bit deeper about the collective mentality as to how blackness is treated, right? That it's not just the police brutality. It's not just the judge who chose to sentence somebody for a crime they didn't commit, but the emotions or feelings or impulses that the entire nation shares when it comes to blackness, from the smallest individual, right, all the way up the system. So I guess what's up next is we like stay vigilant and we don't settle. It's not just reform, right, it's abolished. It adds some weight to why we're like, okay, no, it's not just like you know, change the system a little bit, but no, it's the whole system has got to go. And not just the whole system in terms of the criminal justice system, but the whole collective mentality of white supremacy, which shapes every single aspect of our lives. All of that has got to go. But I know this conversation was kind of like a heavier one because we're talking a lot about some very harsh, difficult topics. We're talking about lives who were lost. We're talking about some very triggering, different moments that have happened. So as we like wrap up this conversation, I again just want to say, you know, check in on each other. Check in on yourself. If you need to take some mental space, take that mental space. If you need to just unplug, unplug. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself, because the goal is to continue to make us as Black people feel unstable. The goal is to continue to make us feel on edge, because that's another way, right, that anti-Blackness isn't able to devalue your everyday life, your everyday experiences. So just really take care of yourself. But all right, y'all, I want to say thank you again for tuning into another episode of Talk to Not At. Please continue to follow us, subscribe, hit that notification button, because we're just going to have some more awesome episodes coming in the near future. And also follow our Instagram page. Shoot me an email if you want to talk. If you got any thoughts, you know, I'd be happy to continue the conversation with you, or, you know, to share some insight from some viewers on a future episode as well. So comment, subscribe, follow IG, shoot me an email. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. And remember, stay safe and stay healthy.